Hey everybody, I hope you're doing good. It's a million degrees where I am. This is an abridged piece from New International, April 1942, by, quote, Europakis, end quote, or Louis Coser. This is from The Fate of the Russian Revolution, Lost Text of Critical Marxism. The section that this piece belongs to is titled, From, quote, Orthodoxy to Millenarianism to the Red Army and Stalinism as Agents of Socialist Advance. Here's the little introduction to the section. The perspective of an almost automatic revolutionary workers' upsurge and socialist victory at the end of World War II was nurtured for the, quote, orthodox by the notion that the Russian armies were, at some deeper level than the visible reality of their brutality in crushing workers and popular movements, which the, quote, orthodox Trotskyists knew about and condemned, agents of socialist advance. Repeatedly, they described Stalin's army as, quote, Trotsky's Red Army, end quote, as if there were some mysterious ether in history immune to the Stalinist purges, which had destroyed mere human beings, able to transmit a revolutionary essence from 1917 to 21 forward to Moscow's military apparatus of the 1940s. Later, this vision of Stalinist forces serving as a process of world revolution despite themselves and despite the working class would become the leitmotif of, quote, official, end quote, Trotskyism. It would continue for 40 years until 1989, when the, quote, accumulated conquests, end quote, of almost half a century of, quote, rise of world revolution, end quote, would be destroyed almost overnight by popular mobilizations with the approbation and active participation of the working class. So that's the end of the introduction. So here we go. So here we go. I actually want to look Louis Coser up real quick. Alright, I'm going to read the Wikipedia for Louis A. Coser. Louis Alfred Coser lived from 1913 to 2003 and was a German-American sociologist serving as the 66th president of the American Sociological Association in 1975. I'm assuming this is the same guy as who wrote this. Born in Berlin as Ludwig Cohen, his father was a successful Jewish industrialist. In 1933, he emigrated to Paris, and in 1941, he left war-torn Paris for the United States, where he married Rose Laub. Citation needed. In the 50s, he enrolled as a graduate student in sociology at Columbia University, taking his PhD at the age of 41. Coser first taught at the University of Chicago and the University of California. He then founded the sociology department at Brandeis University and taught there for 15 years before joining the sociology department of the State University of New York at Stony Brook. Coser frequently worked with the eminent sociologist and his spouse, Rose Laub Coser. First section, sociology. Coser was the first sociologist to try to bring together structural functionalism and conflict theory. His work was focused on finding the functions of social conflict. Coser argued with Georg Simmel that conflict might serve to solidify a loosely structured group. In a society that seems to be disintegrating, conflict with another society, intergroup conflict may restore the integrative core. For example, the cohesiveness of Israeli Jews might be attributed to the long-standing conflict with the Arabs. Conflict with one group may also serve to produce cohesion by leading to a series of alliances with other groups. Conflicts within a society, intergroup conflict, can bring some ordinarily isolated individuals into an active role. The protest over the Vietnam War motivated many young people to take vigorous roles in American political life for the first time. Conflicts also serve a communication function. Prior to conflict, groups may be unsure of their adversary's position, but as a result of conflict, positions and boundaries between groups often become clarified, leaving individuals better able to decide on a proper course of action in relation to their adversary. Much like status consistency, conflicts along the same cleavages intensify the severity of the conflict. Cross-cutting cleavages tend to dissipate the severity of the conflict. For example, the coincidence of economic and political disenfranchisement among Palestinians in the West Bank intensify their conflict with Israeli Jews. In contrast, the non-coincidence of economic and political disenfranchisement among Quebecers reduces somewhat the severity of their conflict with English Canada, especially with the rising prosperity of the French-Canadian new middle class operating in the public sector and corporate world. Politics, new section. Coser was active within the anti-Stalinist left and was close to the independent leftists known as the New York Intellectuals. A eulogy at Carlo Trusca's memorial service in 1943 was delivered by Angelika Balabanov, the socialist activist and former Bolshevik. According to Coser's account of the funeral, quote, "I was sitting near a burly Irish policeman who clearly didn't understand a word of Balabanov's fierce Italian oratory, but at her climax he burst into tears," end quote. In 1954, with Irving Howe, Coser established the radical journal Dissent. Upon his death in 2003, the author of his obituary in that magazine suggested that Coser, quote, "always felt himself a marginal man. He was Jewish and non-Jewish, an American and a European, a hard-headed social analyst committed to rigorous honesty in judgment and deed, and a passionate advocate, a leftist and a critic of the left, a defender of the underdog, and something of an elite intellectual Mandarin," end quote. His book, The New Conservatives, A Critique from the Left, written with Irving Howe in 1974, was one of the first major works to define and analyze neoconservatism. Alright, so here we go. We can actually read now. The policy of, quote, if. The following considerations are prompted by reports we have received from the French Trotskyists with regard to their attitude towards Stalinism and by a document of a French Trotskyist organization which is contained in the March issue of the Fourth International. They have been prompted by the conviction that a continuation of its present attitude to Stalinism and the Soviet Union will doom the Trotskyist group of France. After declaring that the policy of the Communist Party has lost all working-class character, the French comrades in the above-mentioned document proceed, quote, "Under conditions of illegality, the apparatus of the Communist Party cannot directly control the rank-and-file groups. Thus, great possibilities for united action are open to us. The common platform for them and for us is the defense of the Soviet Union. The common platform for them and for us is the defense of the Soviet Union. Our common goal is the proletarian revolution. Our common goal is the proletarian revolution. The unity of action will enable us to exercise a friendly criticism, and to detach the communist workers from Stalinism," end quote. Emphasis mine. Like the authors. Louis Coser. These few lines contain an almost incredible amount of confusion and denote a political blindness of the most dangerous sort. First, we have the time-worn explanation of the, quote, "sane," end quote, membership and the, quote, "bad," end quote, leaders. The leadership and the policy of the CP has lost its working-class character, but the members fight for the, quote, "proletarian revolution," end quote. This is an example of a scholastic approach, very typical of a certain kind of political thinking in a period of decadence in Marxian thought. No analysis is given of what are the real motives and reasons behind the attitude and thinking of members of the communist parties. No attempt is made to clarify the changes which have occurred in the political motives and the thinking of the rank-and-file members. This whole matter is dismissed by the formula, the good members and the bad leaders. It is, of course, obvious that the aims and ideas of the leadership and members of the CP may not coincide. But if it were true that the membership of the CP stands for the proletarian revolution, I cannot see why the founding of a separate party was held necessary years ago. The policy of working from within would still be the only correct and workable one. But is this really true? For example, do the average rank-and-file members have the same ideas on the proletarian dictatorship that we do? We deny this most emphatically. Quote, politics is the art of the concrete, end quote, Lenin liked to say. But for many of the would-be, quote, Leninists, end quote, politics has become the art of the abstract. Not the living reality is analyzed, but formulae are substituted for analysis. Webster defines scholasticism as, quote, the close adherence to traditional teachings and methods prescribed by schools and sects, end quote. And indeed, no better definition could be found for this type of scholasticism prevalent among many Marxists in our time. The, quote, variable, end quote, in their explanation is constituted by the different turns of Stalinist policy, whereas the, quote, constant, end quote, is furnished by a repetitious roundelay about the sanity of the rank and file. But has it not occurred to them that in 15 years of undisputed reign of Stalinist theory inside the communist movement, the basic thinking of the rank and file members also must have been heavily influenced? Has it not occurred to them that such a phenomenon is often observed in history, e.g. church, etc.? 15 years of Stalinist theory and practice have profoundly influenced the mentality of the average member of the Stalinist Party. His ideas about socialism have been completely distorted by the example of the Soviet Union. His conception of proletarian morals has been fundamentally influenced by what is going on there. Above all, the concepts socialism and democracy have been completely dissociated in his mind in these years. He has been led to imagine that the proletarian revolution is a product of a concerted drive by some leaders who conquer power and hold it. His concept of revolution is not that of spontaneous revolutionary activity of the masses, but that of a, quote, revolutionary, end quote, shepherd driving his herd where he considers it best and most suitable. Does all this mean that we are in principle against a united front with the local organizations of the Stalinists? Not at all. Just as we were before the united front just as we were for a united front with the social democracy in Germany before the Nazis came to power, so we are for united front actions in principle with Stalinist workers. It is impossible to decide from here whether or not this is warranted in the given concrete situation, but the decisive point is, do we make a united front with organizations whose leadership we characterize as counter-revolutionary on the basis of defending principles or in general defense of the working class? There's a gulf between the two. Of course, we can make a united front against the rising cost of life, for better pay, for a common defense against the Nazified French police, against the Gestapo, and for many other practical objectives. The contacts established in these common actions can then be utilized to make clear what is, and to fight for Marxian socialism as opposed to Stalinism. But what the French comrades propose is a quite different form of united front based presumably on common principles. Such a united front can only lead to self-destruction of the group itself, because its raison d'être is to preserve certain principles of socialism which are or should be the exact opposite of principles fostered by the Stalin term. The struggle inside the workers' movement should be confined to a dispute over, quote, totalitarian or, quote, democratic concepts of the proletarian revolution. Are you for a worker state which is based on democratic Soviets as the basis of the proletarian power, or are you for a one-party system with a bureaucratic apparatus controlling the destiny of the country in the name of the proletariat? Are you for a dictatorship from above or from below? Hic Rhodus, hic salta. This is the crucial question of the times to come. The crime of Stalin is not that he failed to do this or that. His crime is anti-socialism. The systematic deformation of the fundamental ideas of socialism, above all, is why we reproach Stalinism. What has to be restated as the root of revolutionary theory is the fact that there can be no socialism without democracy, that 5-year plans of themselves have nothing in common with socialism. This is the message of the young socialist revolutionaries. This is the message the young socialist revolutionaries must bring to the workers of Europe. Can this be achieved by, quote, friendly criticism, end quote, by stating that, in fact, there is the common ground of the, quote, proletarian dictatorship, end quote, upon which we both stand? Only two explanations can be found for such an unprincipled attitude. One, either these comrades themselves do not clearly visualize the foregoing fundamental difference and still think in the manner of the bygone days of the, quote, right or, quote, left deviations of Stalin. Or, two, while realizing this, they believe they are making a very, quote, clever, end quote, strategical move, but strategical moves which abandon the very principles of our existence are criminal. especially when they are for the sake of, quote, not hurting feelings, end quote. There are certainly many communists, especially among the younger generation, who are not by any means lost to the cause of the socialist revolution, but they can be won only by a clear-cut criticism, by a merciless pounding at the very heart of the counter-revolutionary theories of Stalinism. In periods of decline and defeat like the present, what is needed most is a clear vision of principles and a relentless fight for the preservation of the idea of democratic socialism. With the mounting tide of alien and hostile ideologies, it is urgently needed to state and restate them, not to regard them as matters which are to be taken for granted. What is further required today is the understanding that Stalinism is not an ideological trend within the working class movement itself, but is really an ideology of an oppressor. To make this clear among the most advanced sections of the proletariat is one of the main tasks of the revolutionaries in Europe. It is a tragic misconception of their role if these revolutionaries think they must concentrate on the CP, on gaining influence among this or that isolated group of communists. They continue to act as though there were still a powerfully established workers' movement, of which they are one tendency. They overlook the consequences of the great defeats of the European working class in the last 10 years. It is necessary to understand first that what is needed in this dark hour is a constant restatement of the ideas of the Communist Manifesto, a restatement of the principles of socialism as the autonomous movement of the proletariat. Once that is understood, the tactical question can be resolved. Most of the theoretical material which is now produced by these people might come under the heading of the policy of, quote, if. If there were a class-conscious proletarian movement, it must take this or that stand on concrete questions. They put the end at the beginning and try to write a, quote, April thesis for a Bolshevik party which does not exist. Such theories are bound to be entirely without value for the very simple reason that if there existed a movement of the kind they speak about, then the objective situation would be altered and the tactical problems would again be different. A small revolutionary socialist group which does not represent a real mass movement should not split hairs about this or that hypothetical turn in their tactical approach to a movement which is absolutely outside their reach. They ought to concentrate on the restatement and elaboration of the broad lines of socialist thought, on the propaganda for the socialist aim among the most advanced layers of the proletariat. The end. Thank you for listening.